In the land of Canaan, there lived a man named Jacob, who was also called Israel. He had 12 sons, but his heart held a special love for Joseph, the firstborn son of his beloved wife Rachel. Joseph was a young man of 17, and he often tended the flocks with his brothers, the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah. But he was different. He would sometimes bring his father reports about his brothers, which did not endear him to them. And then one day, Jacob gave Joseph a gift. A long beautiful robe, a coat of many colors. It was a garment of distinction, a public declaration of his deep favor. When Joseph wore it, the vibrant threads shimmering in the sun, his brothers saw it not as a father's love, but as a symbol of everything they were not. And they hated him for it. They could not even speak a kind word to him. Joseph then made his situation far more dangerous by sharing his dreams. He came to his brothers one day, his eyes bright with a powerful vision he had experienced during the night. "Listen to this dream I had," he announced. "We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field. Then suddenly, my sheaf rose and stood upright, while all of your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it." His brothers were instantly furious, their jealousy igniting into a burning rage. "What?" they snarled amongst themselves. "Do you intend to reign over us? To actually rule us?" Their hatred for him grew even hotter, fueled by the dream's arrogant and clear implication. But Joseph, perhaps naive to the depth of their anger, was not done speaking of his visions. He had another dream, and this one was even more audacious, involving the heavens themselves. Joseph could not contain himself and told his second dream to his father and all his brothers. "Look," he said, "I have had another dream. This time, the sun and moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me." He stood before his entire family, the favorite son describing a vision where they all paid him homage. Even his father Jacob, who loved him deeply, was shocked and forced to publicly rebuke him. "What is this dream you have had?" he asked, his voice a mix of concern and disbelief. "Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow to the ground before you?" His brothers listened in stunned silence, seething with a jealous fury that now knew no bounds. They saw only arrogance in his words, a confirmation of their father's misguided favoritism. This dream solidified their contempt, pushing them from anger towards a dark and conspiratorial plan. Seething from the dreams, the brothers withdrew to graze their father's flocks near the distant lands of Shechem. Jacob, feeling a sense of concern for his sons and the herds, turned to Joseph with a command. "Go now, see if all is well with your brothers and with the flocks, and bring word back to me." "I will go," Joseph said simply, setting off from the valley of Hebron on his long solitary journey. He walked for days, a lone figure with a mission, his colorful coat a bright spot against the landscape. Meanwhile, his brothers saw him approaching from a great distance, recognizing him instantly. "Here comes that dreamer," they hissed to one another, their hearts filling with a collective malice. This was their chance, far from their father's sight and the judgment of their community. They agreed in that moment to act against the brother they had grown to despise so completely. As Joseph finally reached them, tired from his journey, they did not greet him with kindness. Instead, they moved quickly, seizing him, and violently stripping the beautiful robe from his shoulders. He struggled and cried out, confused and terrified by this sudden betrayal from his own flesh and blood. Ignoring his pleas, they dragged him to a dry, empty cistern dug into the hard, rocky ground. They threw him down into the deep, dark pit, where he landed with a cry that they chose to ignore. Then, coldly, they sat down nearby to eat their meal, listening to his desperate shouts from the darkness. Reuben, the eldest, had hoped to secretly return and rescue Joseph later, and urged them not to kill him. But the others were already considering a more permanent and profitable solution to their problem. As they ate, a caravan of Ishmaelite traders appeared on the horizon, heading towards Egypt. Judah saw the approaching caravan and presented a cunning, heartless idea to his brothers. "What will we gain by killing our brother and covering up his blood?" he asked them logically. "Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites." He is, after all, our own flesh and blood, and we should not harm him." The others agreed, seeing the sense in profiting from their betrayal, instead of merely committing murder. So they pulled Joseph, now terrified and pleading, from the dark emptiness of the waterless pit. They haggled with the traders and sold their brother for 20 shekels of silver, the price of a slave. The Ishmaelites took Joseph with them, and he disappeared towards a life of servitude in Egypt. Reuben, who had not been present for the sale, returned to the pit to find it horrifyingly empty. He tore his clothes in despair, crying out, "The boy is gone. And I, where can I turn now?" With Joseph gone, the brothers were left with the grim task of concealing their crime from their father. They took Joseph's special robe, the symbol of all their resentment, and hatched a cruel plan. They slaughtered a young goat and dipped the beautiful, multicolored garment into its fresh blood. They then carried the blood-stained robe back to their father, allowing the evidence to speak for itself. "We found this," they said to Jacob, their voices feigning a somber and grievous tone. "Please examine it to see whether it is your son's robe or not." They watched his face, waiting. Jacob took the robe, the colors now obscured by dark, crimson stains, and recognized it instantly. He cried out in utter agony, "It is my son's robe. A ferocious animal has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces." His cries of grief echoed, a pain the brothers had engineered. Overcome by a loss so profound it shook his very soul, Jacob tore his own garments apart. He put on rough sackcloth, the traditional clothing of deep mourning, and wept for his son. His grief was endless. He refused to be comforted by his children or his wives, lost in his sorrow. "No," he would say, "I will continue to mourn until I go down to the grave to be with my son." So Jacob's tears continued, day after day, and the family was shrouded in his unending despair. Meanwhile, far away in Egypt, Joseph was resold by the traders to a powerful, influential man. This man was Potiphar, an official of the Pharaoh himself, and the captain of the royal guard. And despite the darkness that had fallen upon him, the Lord was with Joseph in that foreign land. He found favor in Potiphar's eyes and was placed in charge of his master's entire household. But Joseph's fortunes turned again when Potiphar's wife, spurned by his integrity, falsely accused him. Enraged, Potiphar seized Joseph and threw him into the prison where the king's prisoners were held. Yet, even within the cold, stone walls of the dungeon, the Lord remained steadfastly with Joseph. He showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden, who saw his worth. Soon, the warden put Joseph in charge of all the prisoners and everything that was done there. It was in this prison that Joseph met two of Pharaoh's former officials, his cupbearer and baker. One night, each man had a dream that troubled him deeply, and they were dejected the next morning. Joseph noticed their sadness and asked, "Why do you look so worried today? Tell me your dreams." The chief cupbearer went first, describing his dream of a vine with 3 branches growing ripe grapes. Joseph listened intently to the cupbearer's dream, and then, inspired by God, gave its interpretation. "The 3 branches are 3 days," he declared with confidence. "Within 3 days, Pharaoh will restore you. He will lift up your head and return you to your position, and you will put Pharaoh's cup in his hand." Then, thinking of his own desperate situation, Joseph added a personal, heartfelt plea to the official. "Please, when all is well with you, remember me and show me kindness by mentioning me to Pharaoh. Tell him my story, and get me out of this prison, for I was stolen from the land of the Hebrews." The chief baker, encouraged by this favorable interpretation, then eagerly shared his own dream with Joseph. But Joseph was forced to deliver a terrifying interpretation. In 3 days, the baker would be executed. 3 days later, it happened exactly as Joseph had said, but the restored cupbearer forgot all about him. And so, for 2 full years, Joseph remained in the dungeon, his faith unwavering though he was forgotten by man. Then, Pharaoh himself was deeply troubled by 2 profound dreams that none of his wise men or magicians could interpret. He first dreamed of 7 fat, healthy cows coming from the Nile, followed by 7 ugly, gaunt cows that devoured the healthy ones. In a second dream he saw 7 plump and full heads of grain, swiftly swallowed by 7 thin and wind-scorched heads. The now agitated cupbearer was suddenly jolted by a long-buried memory. "Today I am finally reminded of my failure," he confessed to Pharaoh, and he told him about the young Hebrew in the dungeon who had so accurately interpreted his own dream years before. Acting immediately on the cupbearer's urgent advice, Pharaoh sent his royal guards to the dungeon. They brought Joseph out from the darkness, shaved him, gave him clean linen clothes, and rushed him into the dazzling royal presence. The mighty king looked down from his elevated throne and declared, "I have dreamed a dream, and there is no one who can interpret it. Yet I have heard it said of you that you merely need to hear a dream to explain its meaning." Joseph stood humbly before Pharaoh's splendor and replied, "It is not in me, but God will give Pharaoh an answer of peace." And so, Pharaoh began to recount his strange visions of the cows and the grain, and Joseph listened intently, his spirit ready to receive the divine meaning. Joseph, now filled with a divine certainty, addressed the anxious king with bold clarity. "Pharaoh's 2 dreams are one and the same," he declared. "God has revealed to Pharaoh what he is decisively about to do. The 7 good cows and the 7 full heads of grain represent 7 years of immense abundance, coming to all of Egypt. But the 7 lean cows and the 7 blighted heads that followed them are 7 years of a famine so severe, it will devour the memory of the former plenty. This matter has been firmly fixed by God, and he will make it happen with great speed." Yet Joseph did not stop with the solemn warning. "Therefore, let Pharaoh select a man who is discerning and wise, and set him with authority over the land. This man must organize and store 1/5 of the harvest during the plentiful years, creating a vast reserve to save Egypt from the ravages of the coming famine." Pharaoh's choice was undeniable. "Since God has made all this known to you," he declared to Joseph, "there is no one so discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders." Joseph was given Pharaoh's signet ring, robes of fine linen, and a gold chain. He traveled throughout Egypt during the 7 years of unparalleled abundance, building storehouses in every city and filling them with grain until they could hold no more. Then, the 7 years of abundance ended, and the famine began, just as Joseph had foretold. The drought gripped Egypt and all the surrounding nations. But when the people of Egypt grew hungry and cried out to Pharaoh, he told them, "Go to Joseph and do whatever he tells you." Joseph opened the storehouses and sold grain to the Egyptians. And soon, the world would come to Egypt's doors, desperate to survive. As the famine tightened its grip on the world, its harsh reach extended to the land of Canaan. In the household of Jacob, the patriarch watched his family begin to starve. "Why do you just sit here looking at one another?" he demanded of his sons. "I have heard there is grain in Egypt. Go down there and buy some for us, so that we may live and not die." And so, 10 of Joseph's brothers undertook the long and weary journey, leaving their youngest brother, Benjamin, under their father's fearful protection. Upon their arrival in Egypt, they were ushered into the court of the powerful vizier. Needing his decree to purchase food, they bowed low before his throne, their faces to the floor, fulfilling the prophetic dreams of their youth. Joseph looked down from his regal seat and recognized his brothers instantly. A storm of old memories and fresh pain surged within him, but he concealed his identity, speaking to them through an interpreter as a harsh Egyptian official. Joseph, still concealing his identity, gave the order to fill his brothers' bags with grain. But he also gave a secret command, to return each man's payment of silver to the top of his sack. On their journey home, one brother discovered the money, and their hearts filled with terror. "What is this that God has done to us?" they cried. When they told their father Jacob all that had occurred, and that the vizier demanded Benjamin's presence, Jacob was shattered. "You have bereaved me of my children," he lamented. "Joseph is no more, and Simeon is no more, and now you would take Benjamin. Everything is against me." But as their grain supply dwindled and the famine persisted, Judah stepped forward. He pledged his own life as a guarantee for Benjamin's safety, vowing to bear the blame forever if he failed to return the boy. With a heavy heart and profound fear, Jacob finally consented, sending them back with gifts, double the silver, and his beloved youngest son. When the brothers returned to Egypt with Benjamin, Joseph was so overcome he had to leave the room to weep. He then devised one final test, ordering that his own silver cup be hidden in Benjamin's sack. When it was discovered, the brothers were seized with dread. Judah, upholding his pledge, stepped forward and begged to be enslaved in Benjamin's place. For the sake of their aged father, this act of selfless love broke Joseph completely. "I am Joseph." He wept, his composure shattered. "Is my father still alive?" His terrified brothers could not answer. "Do not be distressed or angry with yourselves," he said. "For God sent me here ahead of you to preserve life." He embraced them all, forgiving them completely. Pharaoh welcomed Joseph's family, giving them the best land in Egypt. Jacob was brought to his son, and upon seeing him, declared, "Now I am ready to die, for I have seen for myself that you are still alive." The family was reunited, saved from famine by the brother they had betrayed.